Hi, I'm Richard McKenzie, co-author of Microeconomics for MBAs. This video module is going to be about production under conditions of perfect competition. There are actually four market structures the economists identify in terms of their level of competitiveness. On the one end of the competitiveness spectrum, we have what's referred to as perfect competition. This is intense competition. It is a market structure made up of numerous producers, numerous buyers. All of these producers are producing an identical product, and the cost of entry and exit is zero. You can't get more competitive than that because when you have zero entry costs, it means that if any firm raises its price, then other firms will immediately come in to take advantage of those higher prices. On the other end of the competitive spectrum, we have pure monopoly. A pure monopoly is a single seller of a product that is protected by prohibitive barriers to entry. That means that the monopolist can do pretty much as it wishes within the constraints of its cost and within the constraints of the demand for its product. If it raises its price, other firms cannot get in to the market. So this is about as devoid of competition as you can imagine. In between, we have a market structure made up of monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition, this is a market structure made up of a number of firms, maybe a dozen, 2 dozen firms. They can be selling a differentiated product or the same product. There is some cost to entry, but it's not prohibitively costly to enter the market. Indeed, entry is pretty easy, but not costless. The fourth market structure economists identify is oligopoly. This is a market structure made up of few producers. These producers can be producing an identical product, or they can be producing a differentiated product. The key characteristic of this market structure is that there are few producers in the market, and their pricing and production strategies are interdependent. That is, each firm has to be concerned with what the other firm is doing. If one firm lowers its price, then the other firms will typically have to follow suit. In this video module, we're going to pay a special attention to the conditions of perfect competition. You may recall that we have talked about supply and demand curve analysis, and behind this graph is an assumption of perfect competition. That is, there are many producers in the market. Entry is basically free. Under such a circumstance, individual competitors have to accept the market price. They have to accept or reject it. That is, the price of the product is set by the forces of supply and demand, and then each individual producer, who is a small part of the total, will have to accept the price or reject it. That is, if they try to sell above price P1, then they will lose sales altogether. Why? Because there's so many other producers selling at P1, and you have freedom of entry into the market, which means that if one producer raises its price above the market price, that producer will be supplanted by new entrants. This means that the demand facing the individual perfect competitor is horizontal. That is, the producer has a price, the individual perfect competitor faces a price of P1, and that individual producer can decide to sell 1 unit, 2 units, whatever, but it has to be at price P1. If it tries to raise its price just a little bit above P1, it will be supplanted. Its consumers can move to other producers who are selling at P1, or they can move to new entrants. Now, the demand curve is horizontal. This means that the marginal revenue curve is going to be equal to the demand curve. If the producer sells 1 unit at price P1, its additional revenue is going to be equal to P1. And that means that P1 is going to be, the market price is going to be equal to the marginal revenue. If it sells a second unit, P1 times 2 units means that the marginal revenue on this second unit is going to be equal to P1. Moral of the story is the marginal revenue for every one of these units is going to be equal to P1. In a past video module, we developed a set of cost structures that look like this. We can now consider how a perfect competitor might produce under these circumstances. Its demand curve is going to be set by the market price. This is little d, and I'm calling it little d to distinguish it from the market demand curve. The price is going to be set by supply and demand equal to, with the price being set at P1. If this producer is going to maximize its profits, it's going to produce where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. That means it will produce at this particular quantity, little q1. I distinguish it with little q mainly because I'm talking about the output of one firm. Capital Q will be used for the output of the industry. This is Q1 is going to be the profit maximizing price simply because at every point here, the firm selling these units gets a marginal revenue equal to P1. So the marginal revenue compared with the marginal cost of producing this first unit means that it will have a profit on that first unit equal to that distance. The second unit, it will have an even greater profit since marginal cost is going down. The third unit, the fourth unit, and all of these units. Now, as we move out into this area, the marginal cost is escalating. But still, there is a gap between the marginal cost and marginal revenue. Now, some of you may have thought, well, the firm should try to minimize its average total cost and produce quantity Q2. Note that if the firm produces only Q2, then it's missing out on the profit that can be had by producing these additional units. If the firm goes beyond Q1, say it goes to this level, then its marginal cost will be greater than its marginal revenue. That means it will be adding more to its costs than its revenues. Its profits have got to be going down. We can identify the profit of the firm by simply noting that total revenue in this case is going to be equal to P1 times little q1, which is going to be equal to the area bounded by 0, P1 little a q1. So this box here represents revenue. We take note of the fact that the average cost of production is ATC 1. If you multiply the average cost of production, you get total cost. Average total cost of production times Q1, and you get a box bounded by 0, ATC1, little b, and Q1. So here we have a box that's like this. That's the total revenue the firm receives. You have another box, which is this, and that is the total cost incurred. The firm generates a profit equal to that area there.